Introduction: The Watchmaker and the Gaze. For centuries, humanity has been trained to believe in the myth of the great watchmaker. We have been sold the illusion that the universe is an immense machinery of bronze and steel, a system of heavy, blind gears turning relentlessly in the dark, completely indifferent to our existence. Under this cowardly vision, man has surrendered. Common man has lowered himself to the status of a simple, passive spectator. He perceives himself as a speck of dust trapped under the glass of a watch he cannot control, merely observing with hunched shoulders how the hands of chance, disease, poverty, or tragedy advance without mercy. That is the great lie of inert biomass. Classical physics, describing falling apples and predictable orbits of dead planets, is a sedative for weak minds seeking excuses for their misery and lack of authority. But when you descend into the depths of matter, when you observe the fabric of reality under the lens of metaphysics and quantum physics, the bronze watch disintegrates. The universe has proven, with undeniable empirical coldness, that it is not a closed mechanism running behind your back. It is a seething paradox. At a fundamental level, reality is not solid. It is an ocean of dense fog, a storm of infinite probabilities, floating in a state of thermal suspension. This fog does not crystallize into rock. It does not become an event or concrete matter until a living eye rests upon it. Therein lies the absolute terror and majesty of the observer paradox. Your gaze is not a passive glass that simply receives the light of the world. Your attention is not a harmless window. Your gaze is a cast-iron hammer falling upon an anvil. It is the force of gravity that forces the fog of probability to collapse and acquire a physical form. The failure of ordinary humanity lies in the fact that they observe the world from hysteria, fear, and dispersion. Their minds operate as asymmetrical rooms, spaces full of dead corners where the noise and reverberation of terror bounce. By looking with fear, they crystallize horror. To forge true conscious matter, the individual must first treat the acoustics of their own mind. They must absorb the echoes of the outer world and invoke the most sepulchral silence. They must learn to stand firm and hold the weight of the void upon their shoulders without blinking. Only when you stand in the aseptic isolation of your own sovereignty does your gaze abandon the lightness of gas and acquire the density of lead. This book is not a philosophical consolation for weary souls. It is a treatise on thermodynamics applied to the psyche. It is the definitive destruction of your role as the watchmaker's victim. From this page forward, you will understand that the material universe is not happening to you. The universe is being forged second by second in the image and likeness of the atmospheric pressure of your own gaze. Open your eyes, feel the weight of your attention, and prepare to melt the gears of destiny. Chapter 1. The Myth of Passive Biomass. The tragedy of the gaseous man. If you observe a drop of water falling onto a red-hot iron plate, you will witness a fundamental law of thermodynamics. The water, unable to sustain its form under that immense heat transfer, enters structural panic. It evaporates. It ceases to be a dense, united body and becomes an erratic, dispersed gas that flees in all directions. It attempts to escape atmospheric pressure until it disappears completely into the insignificance of the air. This is the exact psychological anatomy of the vast majority of humanity. They are beings in a gaseous state. Passive biomass. The ordinary man walks through the world convinced that life is a climatic event that happens to him. He wakes up every morning believing that the economy, tragedies, illnesses, betrayals, and crises are hailstorms that heaven throws at his head by pure whim. When suffering knocks on his door, he immediately adopts the posture of the martyr. He bows his head, hunches his shoulders, and seeks comfort in complaining. He is a victim. He shouts to the four winds that he is a victim of circumstances, an accident of biology drifting in a rough ocean. This posture is not only pathetic, it is a monumental calculation error. By declaring themselves victims, they renounce their own mass. They refuse to solidify. They prefer to be a light gas, blown by the winds of opinion. Being a gas requires no effort. Being solid, however, demands enduring friction. It demands sustaining a center of gravity. The tragedy of feeling like an accident is the greatest farce ever perpetrated by the human mind. By accepting the myth of passive biomass, the individual exempts himself from the terrifying responsibility. It is much easier to blame the blind watchmaker of destiny than to admit that the misery in which they dwell has been forged, blow, by the unfocused weakness of their own gaze. The acoustics of the untreated mind. To understand why biomass is unable to observe reality without deforming it, we must analyze the acoustics of its own mind. The mind of the reactive individual is a defective sounding board. Imagine an asymmetrical room, perhaps an L-shaped space, built with heavy, bare concrete walls, without the slightest acoustic treatment. In such a space, any sound emitted, a scream, the strike of a hammer, the cry of a child, does not die naturally. The sound wave hits the rigid wall violently, bounces with almost all its initial energy, and travels toward the opposite wall. In the corners of that L-shaped mind, the low frequencies of terror and anxiety accumulate. They create standing waves, a deafening hum that makes the entire structure vibrate. This is the reverberation of fear. When an external event impacts the life of the gaseous man, an economic setback, a rejection, a loss, the sound wave enters his naked psyche. Having no absorption panels, the pain bounces. The original event lasts a second, but in the mind of the biomass, the echo of that pain reverberates for years, multiplying by the friction of constant memory. They are deafened by their own defective acoustics, and a man deafened by panic cannot observe the universe clearly. His eyes are dilated by the terror of the next bounce. When they look toward the horizon of quantum probability, their gaze trembles, and that trembling transmits absolute chaos to the fog of reality. The empirical result is that they attract exactly the catastrophe they most fear, because their eyes, injected with the vibration of panic, act as lead magnets for misfortune. The refuge of the weak, destiny and luck. Being unable to tolerate the deafening noise of their untreated minds and terrified by the disastrous consequences of their own erratic gaze, the masses invented the most cowardly concepts in the history of philosophy: destiny and luck. Destiny is the excuse of slaves. It is the argument wielded by a piece of dead wood. It is dragged by the river current toward the waterfall. It was written, they say, while seeing how their lives crumble through their own lack of authority. It was the will of something superior. They lie. There is no pre-established script forged in the stars. The only script is the thermodynamic inertia of an object. It is a massless object being pushed by heavier objects. Luck, on the other hand, is the beggar's consolation. To believe in luck is to assume that the universe is a casino roulette, and that the only form of triumph is to sit and wait passively for an invisible force to drop the steel ball into your slot. The observer. Paradox mercilessly destroys these two refugees. In high physics, there is no luck. There is collapse of probability. There is no destiny. There are vectors of inertia and friction applied in real time. If your life is miserable, it is because you are observing your existence from the angle of defeat. You are crystallizing coal instead of diamond. The material universe does not judge you. It simply obeys the atmospheric pressure of your expectations. If you expect to be a victim, the board of existence will immediately adjust to send you your executioner. Isolation and the construction of silence. To abandon the gaseous state and stop being an inert object in the theater of the world, you must undergo the most implacable trial by fire. You must repair the acoustics of your own mind. This repair is not achieved in the midst of the crowd. It is not achieved by seeking the approval of society or drowning your thoughts. This transmutation demands an absolute withdrawal. This is why the strong love extreme solitude. The common people flee from solitude because, when they are left alone in a silent room, the noise of their own internal reverberation drives them crazy. They hear their own parasitic echoes and flee in terror. They turn on a television or seek someone to talk to them to anesthetize the hum. But the architect of his own destiny seeks extreme solitude with the fervor of one entering a forge. He understands that only in the most absolute and sepulchral of isolations can he begin to install heavy absorption panels. Each hour you spend in silence, refusing to react, refusing to complain, refusing to escape, is a thick plate of mineral fiber installed in the corners of your mind. Gradually, the reverberation dies. Fear bounces against those treated walls and is devoured by silence. The standing waves of anxiety dissipate. One day, you wake up in the middle of solitude and realize the noise has completely disappeared. The air inside you has become aseptic, pure, and overwhelmingly heavy. You have managed to isolate the room. And in that precise instant, you experience the most terrifying and majestic discovery: the weight of the void. The birth of conscious matter. The void is not nothingness. That is another error of weak minds. The void is an immense pressure chamber, a dense space loaded with latent energy, waiting patiently for a will of steel to give it shape. When you feel the weight of the void inside you and do not break, your internal temperature changes. The gas of your old personality cools, it condenses, it densifies, until it becomes a solid, immovable, and heavy block. You have ceased to be passive biomass. You have become, by pure thermodynamic rigor, conscious matter. The transition is irreversible. A man of lead cannot return to being vapor. From this state of absolute density, your gaze changes nature. Your eyes are no longer fragile and passive lenses that only serve to weep at the blows of luck. Your eyes have become anvils and hammers. Since there is no noise in your mind, your attention is a concentrated beam of light, a pure gravitational force. When conscious matter rests its gaze on the ocean of fog of quantum possibilities, it doesn't do so to see what is going to happen. It does so to force the fog to precipitate. It does so to dictate the exact form of crystallization. You cease to be the accident and become the first cause. The myth of passive biomass is the iron chain that has kept you tied to the ground. Upon reading this, the chain has begun to melt. The excuse has evaporated. If you accept the weight of the void, you must also accept the crushing authority it entails. Everything you decide to look at will solidify in your life. The forge is lit. It is time to learn how to strike the metal. The solidification of the sovereign vector. Once you have achieved the state of conscious matter, you must understand that your existence is no longer a collection of random events, but a series of sovereign vectors. A vector is not just a point in space, it is a direction with magnitude and force. The gaseous man has no vectors. He has only Brownian motion, bouncing aimlessly like a molecule in a heated gas. He moves because he is hit, not because he intends to move. You, as a solid body of lead, move through the world by displacing the medium around you. You do not ask for space, you create it. This shift requires a total abandonment of hoping. Hoping is a low-frequency vibration that acknowledges a lack of power. When you hope for something, you are telling the universe that the outcome is outside your gravitational pull. Conscious matter does not hope. It commands the render. In the language of the Matrix, to hope is to send a request to a server that you do not own. To command is to write directly into the root directory of the BIOS. This is why the weight of the void is so critical. It provides the mass necessary for your commands to be executed by the hardware of reality. If your mind is still cluttered with the static of the biomass, your commands will be thermal throttled. The system will reject them because they lack the coherence required for crystallization. You must be as silent and cold as the vacuum of space for the hologram to recognize you as the administrator. The geometric dictatorship of the gaze. The gaze of the conscious matter individual is a geometric dictatorship. In the quantum world, the act of measurement defines the state of the particle. In your world, the act of sustained attention defines the state of your destiny. This is not positive thinking, which is a gaseous attempt to mask fear. This is gravitational imposition. When you fix your gaze on a target, you're not wishing for it. You are increasing the local gravity of that probability until it becomes the only mathematically viable outcome. You are bending the light of the hologram until it focuses on your desired coordinate. The biomass will call this willpower, but they do not understand the physics behind it. Willpower is a struggle. Gravitational imposition is a law. A planet does not struggle to keep its moon in orbit. It simply is heavy enough that the moon has no other choice. To reach this level of authority, you must purge the parasitic frequencies from your field. These are the small doubts, the social obligations, and the reactive emotions that act as friction. Every time you get offended, you lose mass. Every time you explain yourself to a gaseous person, you lose density. The sovereign remains in a state of high-pressure stillness. Even when moving through the chaos of the city, his internal acoustics remain anechoic. He is the quietest thing in the room, and therefore the most dangerous. He is the one who dictates the atmospheric pressure of the situation. The threshold of the first render. As you begin to strike the metal of your reality, you will encounter the threshold of resistance. The matrix is an entropic system that prefers its current state. When you first attempt to impose your gravity, the environment will push back. This is not bad luck. It is simply the friction of the new mass. The gaseous man feels this friction and immediately reverts to his vaporous state, thinking he has failed. The conscious matter man feels the friction and increases his density. He knows that friction is proof that the metal is being shaped. He welcomes the heat because it is the energy required for the transformation. This is where the 4 pillars of your architecture become your structural support. These pillars, isolation, silence, mass, and command, are what prevent you from collapsing under the pressure of the new reality you are forging. You are no longer a guest in the universe. You are the landlord. The first successful render will be subtle, a coincidence that isn't a coincidence, a door opening that was previously locked, a sudden silence in a room full of noise when you enter. These are the debug logs of the universe confirming that your root access has been granted. Do not celebrate these small victories with gaseous excitement. Observe them with the cold satisfaction of an engineer whose code finally compiled without errors. Maintain your density. Stay in the forge. The world is soft, you are hard. Strike until the hologram yields. Chapter 3. The Acoustics of Inner Silence. The Architecture of Ruin. The material universe does not negotiate with intentions, it negotiates with gravities and resonances. If the observer paradox dictates that your gaze is the hammer forging quantum fog into solid rock, we must examine the place from which you strike. Your mind is not an ethereal concept, it is a 3-dimensional structure. It is an architectural space. The collapse of most humans begins here. They inhabit ruined buildings with doors torn off hinges and bare walls, exposed to the chaos outside. Ordinary man, the biomass seeing itself as a victim of luck, never inspects the acoustics of his own cranial vault. They think thought is a harmless whisper. They completely ignore the laws of wave propagation. Every fear you harbor, every complaint you utter, and every doubt you allow into your ecosystem is a shockwave. It is pure acoustic energy released within a closed enclosure. If the mind is not acoustically treated, if it is just a cold cave, disaster is guaranteed. You cannot observe reality with a monarch's precision if you are deafened by the echo of your own hysteria. For the gaze to acquire the weight of conscious matter, the space from which you observe must become an impregnable sanctuary. You must build silence. Silence is the deliberate annihilation of reverberation. The asymmetrical mind and the reverberation trap. To understand this disaster, let's use the analogy of structural acoustics. Imagine a room not designed with perfect proportions. It is not a symmetric square. Imagine a mind shaped like an L-shaped room. An L-shaped structure is an acoustic engineer's nightmare because it breaks the symmetry of sound. In such a geometry, sound waves do not distribute uniformly. Sound hits asymmetrical walls, deflects, bounces at unpredictable angles, and travels into blind hallways. The mind of the gaseous man, deformed by unresolved traumas, vanity, or terror of poverty and rejection, is exactly like that L-shaped room. When an external event impacts life, a failure, an insult, a financial loss, the impact generates a roar. The sound wave enters the deformed psyche. Hitting the bare wall of the ego, the wave is not absorbed. It bounces with a destructive force identical to the original. It travels through the blind hallway of memory. It hits past failures, multiplies, and returns to the center. We call this reverberation. The original event lasted a second, but in the untreated mind, The echo reverberates for years. They deafen themselves by repeating the impact. Worse, in the corners, bouncing waves collide, creating standing waves. These are pressure accumulations where sound stays frozen, vibrating with monstrous intensity. Standing waves in the psyche are called paralyzing panic and depression. They create dead zones where vital energy suffocates. If you observe the quantum fog from this strident room, your gaze will be unfocused. It will tremble. The universe, a blind servant obeying the geometry you project, will collapse the fog into an exact reflection of your inner chaos. It will materialize the acoustic hell you carry inside. The assault of stridency, the inertia of the crowds. The problem is not just the noise you generate. The real danger is the invasion of external noise. The world of the masses is an unbearably noisy ecosystem. Modern society is designed to emit sharp, sibilant, and irritating frequencies. Market panic, manufactured outrage, and the drama of parasitic relationships. This composes a wall of strident sound. The system wants your mind to be a cave with doors wide open. They demand empathy for chaos. They demand you pay attention to misfortunes you cannot control, to listen to the complaints of weaker organisms, and to allow their stridency to penetrate your hallways. If the architecture of your mind is not sealed, these sharp frequencies will enter like a gale. High frequencies specialize in tearing nerves, exhausting thermal energy, and destroying your ability to keep a steady gaze. A man listening to others' noise becomes a receiver for trash, vibrating to the tribe's fears. The observer paradox demands absolute sovereignty. You cannot forge the destiny of an empire if the cries of plebeians fighting in the market are heard in the throne room. Installing phono-absorbent panels. The non-negotiable step to transmute your biology into the first cause is installing tactical isolation. You must treat the acoustics of your psyche. You must line the bare walls of your mind with thick, heavy, phono-absorbent panels. In the physical world, a panel does not destroy sound magically. It obeys the first law of thermodynamics. Energy is only transformed. When a sound wave hits the density of the acoustic panel, friction converts kinetic energy into thermal energy. The panel absorbs noise and turns it into slight heat. It kills the bounce. How are these built in the mind? Through non-reaction. Non-reaction is the ability to receive an impact and nullify its inertia. When someone insults you, or a project is snatched away, the biomass instinct is to bounce. It is to scream, rage, or complain. That is the bare concrete wall hitting back and multiplying the echo. The monarch receives the impact. He hears the insult or perceives the crisis but does not move a facial muscle. He emits no sigh. He holds his breath. His mind, lined with heavy panels of calculated indifference, absorbs the shockwave. The friction of containing rage or fear converts destructive energy into pure thermal energy in his chest. It transmutes the noise of crisis into heat, density, and repressed power. The impact enters but does not exit. It dies in the panel. There is no echo. There is no reverberation. The problem suffocates in the high-density foam of your sovereignty. Bass traps and deep terrors. Eliminating sharp frequencies, gossip, daily annoyances is the task of wall panels. But in the corners of your L-shaped room, a deadlier enemy accumulates, low frequencies. In acoustics, low frequencies, sub-bass, are massive. They are waves so long and powerful they cross brick walls. You cannot stop them with thin foam. They accumulate in corners, inflating room pressure until foundations vibrate. In the human psyche, these are primary terrors. The terror of absolute poverty, old age, eternal solitude, and death. Biomass pretends they don't exist, but the hum fouls their existence. To deal with sub-bass, the architect of conscious matter must install heavy bass traps in the darkest corners of the soul. A bass trap is an object of enormous mass placed to absorb the most brutal wavelength. Your bass trap is tactical fatalism. It is the voluntary assimilation of the worst-case scenario. To trap the fear of poverty, do not evade it. Look at it directly. Accept it as a physical possibility and assume your core of obsidian would remain intact. To trap the fear of solitude, do not run toward cheap affection. Isolate yourself until lack of company becomes your shield. When you embrace the worst case with cold resignation, you install a massive block of lead in your mind's corner. The low frequency of terror hits that block and is devoured. Fear of loss vanishes when you accept you possess nothing you cannot rebuild with one strike of your quantum hammer. The corners go silent, the anechoic chamber and the forging of the gaze. When you have covered every inch with non-reaction panels, when you have placed lead traps in your corners, when you have sealed bronze doors against the crowds, you reach the architectural pinnacle of the mind. You become an anechoic chamber. An anechoic chamber is designed to absorb all sound reflections. It is the purest, strictest silence manufactured in the physical world. It is so silent that the vacuum becomes heavy and crushing. Those who enter unprepared usually panic. As external noise vanishes, they hear the violent pumping of their own blood, their joints rubbing, and their own nervous system creaking. Absolute silence is terrifying for biomass because it faces them with the only sound they cannot turn off, their own naked existence. But for you, this armored enclosure is the forge. In the aseptic darkness of your mind's anechoic chamber, there is no longer any distraction. There are no echoes of the past clouding judgment, no hums of anxiety about the future. All your vital heat, all thermal energy once dispersed in hysteria, is now contained in a single point, boiling under pressure without an escape valve. It is from this high-density silence that the observer paradox is executed. When you stand in the geometric center of your inner chamber and rest your gaze on the quantum fog, that gaze is no longer a weak lighthouse. It has become an industrial laser cutting titanium plates. All the gravity of your being, purified of noise and echo, crashes against probability. By observing from absolute silence, you give the universe no options. You don't ask permission. The order travels clean. The fog freezes instantly and violently. Atoms align with the undeniable symmetry of your inner peace. You are the monarch in the obsidian vault, the thermal storage of the sovereign. This silence is not empty. It is a pressurized vessel of potential. By containing the noise, you create a thermal battery of intent. While the biomass leaks their power through the porous walls of their chatter, you are accumulating the necessary voltage to overwrite the primary code of the hologram. Your gaze, backed by this internal pressure, becomes a singularity. The more you refine this acoustic treatment, the less effort is required for manifestation. You no longer strike with the desperation of the weak. You strike with the inevitability of a collapsing star. Every internal panel you install increases your external impact. You have mastered the environment by first mastering the void within. The silence is now your most loyal ally. It is the medium through which your will flows, undisturbed and absolute. Welcome to the command center of your own reality, where the only sound is the rhythmic heartbeat of a god in the making. Chapter 3. The Acoustics of Inner Silence. The architecture of ruin. The material universe does not negotiate with intentions, it negotiates with gravities and resonances. If the observer paradox dictates that your gaze is the hammer forging quantum fog into solid rock, we must examine the place from which you strike. Your mind is not an ethereal concept, it is a three-dimensional structure. It is an architectural space. The collapse of most humans begins here. They inhabit ruined buildings with doors torn off hinges and bare walls, exposed to the chaos outside. Ordinary man, the biomass seeing itself as a victim of luck, never inspects the acoustics of his own cranial vault. They think thought is a harmless whisper. They completely ignore the laws of wave propagation. Every fear you harbor, every complaint you utter, and every doubt you allow into your ecosystem is a shockwave. It is pure acoustic energy released within a closed enclosure. If the mind is not acoustically treated, if it is just a cold cave, disaster is guaranteed. You cannot observe reality with a monarch's precision if you are deafened by the echo of your own hysteria. For the gaze to acquire the weight of conscious matter, the space from which you observe must become an impregnable sanctuary. You must build silence. Silence is the deliberate annihilation of reverberation. The asymmetrical mind and the reverberation trap. To understand this disaster, let's use the analogy of structural acoustics. Imagine a room not designed with perfect proportions. It is not a symmetric square. Imagine a mind shaped like an L-shaped room. An L-shaped structure is an acoustic engineer's nightmare because it breaks the symmetry of sound. In such a geometry, sound waves do not distribute uniformly. Sound hits asymmetrical walls, deflects, bounces at unpredictable angles, and travels into blind hallways. The mind of the gaseous man, deformed by unresolved traumas, vanity, or terror of poverty and rejection, is exactly like that L-shaped room. When an external event impacts life, a failure, an insult, a financial loss, the impact generates a roar. The sound wave enters the deformed psyche. Hitting the bare wall of the ego, the wave is not absorbed. It bounces with a destructive force identical to the original. It travels through the blind hallway of memory. It hits past failures, multiplies, and returns to the center. We call this reverberation. The original event lasted a second, but in the untreated mind, the echo reverberates for years. They deafen themselves by repeating the impact. Worse, in the corners, bouncing waves collide, creating standing waves. These are pressure accumulations where sound stays frozen, vibrating with monstrous intensity. Standing waves in the psyche are called paralyzing panic and depression. They create dead zones where vital energy suffocates. If you observe the quantum fog from this strident room, your gaze will be unfocused. It will tremble. The universe, a blind servant obeying the geometry you project, will collapse the fog into an exact reflection of your inner chaos. It will materialize the acoustic hell you carry inside. The assault of stridency, the inertia of the crowds. The problem is not just the noise you generate. The real danger is the invasion of external noise. The world of the masses is an unbearably noisy ecosystem. Modern society is designed to emit sharp, sibilant, and irritating frequencies. Market panic, manufactured outrage, and the drama of parasitic relationships. This composes a wall of strident sound. The system wants your mind to be a cave with doors wide open. They demand empathy for chaos. They demand you pay attention to misfortunes you cannot control, to listen to the complaints of weaker organisms, and to allow their stridency to penetrate your hallways. If the architecture of your mind is not sealed, these sharp frequencies will enter like a gale. High frequencies specialize in tearing nerves, exhausting thermal energy, and destroying your ability to keep a steady gaze. A man listening to others' noise becomes a receiver for trash, vibrating to the tribe's fears. The observer paradox demands absolute sovereignty. You cannot forge the destiny of an empire if the cries of plebeians fighting in the market are heard in the throne room. Installing phono-absorbent panels. The non-negotiable step to transmute your biology into the first cause is installing tactical isolation. You must treat the acoustics of your psyche. You must line the bare walls of your mind with thick, heavy, phono-absorbent panels. In the physical world, a panel does not destroy sound magically. It obeys the first law of thermodynamics. Energy is only transformed. When a sound wave hits the density of the acoustic panel, friction converts kinetic energy into thermal energy. The panel absorbs noise and turns it into slight heat. It kills the bounce. How are these built in the mind? Through non-reaction. Non-reaction is the ability to receive an impact and nullify its inertia. When someone insults you, or a project is snatched away, the biomass instinct is to bounce. It is to scream, rage, or complain. That is the bare concrete wall hitting back and multiplying the echo. The monarch receives the impact. He hears the insult or perceives the crisis but does not move a facial muscle. He emits no sigh. He holds his breath. His mind, lined with heavy panels of calculated indifference, absorbs the shockwave. The friction of containing rage or fear converts destructive energy into pure thermal energy in his chest. It transmutes the noise of crisis into heat, density, and repressed power. The impact enters but does not exit. It dies in the panel. There is no echo. There is no reverberation. The problem suffocates in the high-density foam of your sovereignty. Bass traps and deep terrors. Eliminating sharp frequencies, gossip, daily annoyances is the task of wall panels. But in the corners of your L-shaped room, a deadlier enemy accumulates, low frequencies. In acoustics, low frequencies, sub-bass, are massive. They are waves so long and powerful they cross brick walls. You cannot stop them with thin foam. They accumulate in corners, inflating room pressure until foundations vibrate. In the human psyche, these are primary terrors. The terror of absolute poverty, old age, eternal solitude, and death. Biomass pretends they don't exist, but the hum fouls their existence. To deal with sub-bass, the architect of conscious matter must install heavy bass traps in the darkest corners of the soul. A bass trap is an object of enormous mass placed to absorb the most brutal wavelength. Your bass trap is tactical fatalism. It is the voluntary assimilation of the worst-case scenario. To trap the fear of poverty, do not evade it. Look at it directly. Accept it as a physical possibility and assume your core of obsidian would remain intact. To trap the fear of solitude, do not run toward cheap affection. Isolate yourself until lack of company becomes your shield. When you embrace the worst case with cold resignation, you install a massive block of lead in your mind's corner. The low frequency of terror hits that block and is devoured. Fear of loss vanishes when you accept you possess nothing you cannot rebuild with one strike of your quantum hammer. The corners go silent. The anechoic chamber and the forging of the gaze. When you have covered every inch with non-reaction panels, when you have placed lead traps in your corners, when you have sealed bronze doors against the crowds, you reach the architectural pinnacle of the mind. You become an anechoic chamber. An anechoic chamber is designed to absorb all sound reflections. It is the purest, strictest silence manufactured in the physical world. It is so silent that the vacuum becomes heavy and crushing. Those who enter unprepared usually panic. As external noise vanishes, they hear the violent pumping of their own blood, their joints rubbing, and their own nervous system creaking. Absolute silence is terrifying for biomass because it faces them with the only sound they cannot turn off. Their own naked existence. But for you, this armored enclosure is the forge. In the aseptic darkness of your mind's anechoic chamber, there is no longer any distraction. There are no echoes of the past clouding judgment, no hums of anxiety about the future. All your vital heat, all thermal energy once dispersed in hysteria, is now contained in a single point, boiling under pressure without an escape valve. It is from this high-density silence that the observer paradox is executed. When you stand in the geometric center of your inner chamber and rest your gaze on the quantum fog, that gaze is no longer a weak lighthouse. It has become an industrial laser cutting titanium plates. All the gravity of your being, purified of noise and echo, crashes against probability. By observing from absolute silence, you give the universe no options. You don't ask permission. The order travels clean, the fog freezes instantly and violently. Atoms align with the undeniable symmetry of your inner peace. You are the monarch in the obsidian vault, the thermal storage of the sovereign. This silence is not empty, it is a pressurized vessel of potential. By containing the noise, you create a thermal battery of intent. While the biomass leaks their power through the porous walls of their chatter, you are accumulating the necessary voltage to overwrite the primary code of the hologram. Your gaze, backed by this internal pressure, becomes a singularity. The more you refine this acoustic treatment, the less effort is required for manifestation. You no longer strike with the desperation of the weak. You strike with the inevitability of a collapsing star. Every internal panel you install increases your external impact. You have mastered the environment by first mastering the void within. The silence is now your most loyal ally. It is the medium through which your will flows, undisturbed and absolute. Welcome to the command center of your own reality, where the only sound is the rhythmic heartbeat of a god in the making. Chapter 4. The Thermodynamics of Attention. The only currency the cosmos respects. The greatest deception humanity has suffered is not political or economic. It is a thermodynamic deception. Biomass has been led to believe that its attention is a simple cognitive process, a passive act of reception. They believe that paying attention is like opening a window to let in the light of the landscape. Under this harmless and castrated premise, the ordinary man gives away his attention to any stimulus that passes before his eyes, convinced that looking has no physical consequences. The physics of power crushes this notion with the weight of a steel anvil. In the secret mechanics of the universe, attention is not a crystal that receives. It is a furnace that emits. Attention is pure thermal energy. It is the fundamental fuel, the only currency of exchange that the three-dimensional universe recognizes and respects. Where you place your attention, you are transferring heat. Where you place your gaze, you are injecting mass. It is a physical transaction of power. Imagine the material universe, in its unobserved state, as an immense plain of ice at 0 degrees Kelvin. It is dark, inert, suspended in the fog of probability. Nothing moves. Nothing is forged, but in the exact millisecond in which you rest your attention on a specific point of that plane, it is as if you pointed a torch. You point an industrial blowtorch over the ice. The temperature rises violently. Atoms begin to vibrate from the friction of your gaze. The ice melts, the water boils, and reality begins to take the form of the mold that your mind is imposing on it. Your attention gives life to dead matter. What you ignore freezes and dies. The thermal dispersion of the masses. If we understand that attention is creative fire, we only need to observe the behavior of the multitudes to understand why they live submerged in mediocrity and impotence. The gaseous man is a thermal squanderer. Since he has no center of gravity of his own, nor acoustic walls in his mind, he functions as a bonfire. He is a bonfire exposed to the winter winds. His attention, his valuable vital heat, is dispersed in 1,000 erratic directions. Observe how they operate in their daily lives. They wake up and throw a handful of their fire at the gossip of their neighbors. They throw more heat at the catastrophic news society presents. They spend immense amounts of thermal energy looking with envy at the lives of others, or looking with resentment at the errors of their own past. What is the physical result of this dispersion? Exactly the same as if you tried to melt a block of iron by rubbing it with a feather. They generate heat, yes, but very weak. It is a heat so diluted, so scattered, and so weak that it never reaches the boiling point necessary to alter the structure of its reality. They weakly illuminate thousands of useless things, but they never manage to forge a single sword. They die of cold in their own lives because they have given away their fire. They warm the agendas, the fears, and the pockets of others. Biomass is not a victim of material poverty. It is a victim of the chronic hemorrhage of its own attention. They have emptied their furnaces to heat nothingness. They have become thermal ghosts in a world that only responds to concentrated pressure. The obsidian lens and the mathematical point. For conscious matter to impose itself on reality, the monarch must subject his attention to an implacable optical discipline. He must abandon the dispersed bonfire and become the lens. Any child who has played with a magnifying glass under the midday sun knows the fundamental principle of the thermodynamics of attention. If you hold the magnifying glass and move your hand erratically over a sheet of paper, the crystal will simply project a circle of light that dances on the surface. The sheet is illuminated, but it undergoes no physical alteration. The light is dispersed, but if you stop your hand, if you apply charged immobility, if you keep the crystal perfectly still, with a pulse of steel, the circle of light begins to shrink. It compresses. All the immense radiation of the solar star tunnels through the crystal and collapses into a single microscopic point on the paper, a mathematical point of pure density and extreme thermal friction. In a matter of seconds, the sheet begins to smoke. The cellulose fibers, unable to withstand the immense thermal friction concentrated in that single millimeter, surrender. The paper blackens, bursts into flames, and the fire consumes the matter. That is exactly what happens when the individual masters his gaze. When you lock yourself in the anechoic chamber of your isolation, purged of the noise of the crowd, your mind becomes a thick and perfect obsidian lens. When you choose an objective, whether the demolition of an obstacle or the materialization of an empire, and fix your attention on it without blinking, you invoke fire. You are taking all your vital energy, all your gravitational mass, and you are collapsing it over the fog of quantum probability. Three-dimensional reality does not have the structural resistance to withstand that level of focused pressure. First it will smoke as coincidences, then it will blacken as opportunities. Finally, it will explode into the physical and resounding materialization of your will. The universe does not surrender to those who desire it with strength. The universe burns before those who observe it without moving. The combustion of terror, invoking monsters. This ballistic power is a double-edged sword forged without a hilt. It cuts with the same ferocity forward as backward. Physics has no morality. The material universe is deaf, blind, and completely lacks compassion. It only understands weights, temperatures, and densities. This is the grotesque error. Humanity does not understand that the universe does not distinguish between the observation of desire and the observation of fear. What is fear in the eyes of thermodynamics? Fear is nothing more than hyper-concentrated attention on an unwanted scenario. It is the accidental use of the industrial torch. When biomass is terrified by the possibility of financial ruin, disease, or loneliness, what do? They fix their gaze on that scenario. They obsess. They spend sleepless nights staring at the ceiling, visualizing the catastrophe in great detail. They use the magnifying glass of their mind with discipline. They concentrate all the ray of their vital energy on the imaginary tragedy. At a quantum level, the result is devastating. The plane of ice feels the heat. The fog of probability feels the hammer of observation. The universe does not care that you cry while looking. It only registers the injection of mass. And so, by pure combustion of his own terror, the cowardly man forges in solid iron the same monsters from which he flees. He feeds them. He gives them density. Every time you observe your own ruin with terror, you are transferring the heat necessary for it to rise from the ice and walk toward you. Fear is the most efficient act of thermodynamic suicide in the cosmos. It is the misuse of the most sacred resource in the matrix. Tactical contempt and death by freezing. If attention is the blood that gives life to reality, then lack of attention is absolute suffocation. The true operator of conscious matter masters the art of creation, but is even more lethal in the art of destruction through tactical blindness. When a problem or an enemy enters your ecosystem, instinct screams. It will scream at you to pay attention to defend yourself. If you look at it, if you engage in discussions, if you become indignant or worried, you are injecting oxygen into the bonfire. You are giving gravity to your enemy. You are turning it into a heavy object within your own solar system. The monarch's tactic is absolute thermal withdrawal. It is icy contempt. When chaos tries to call your attention, deny it your gaze. Act as if the obstacle were a transparent and insignificant mist. Withdraw all your heat from its coordinates. Do not speak of it. Do not complain of it. Do not give it mental friction. By depriving the crisis of your observation, you return it to the ice plane at 0 degrees Kelvin. You condemn it to quantum hypothermia. Without the hammer of your attention to keep its atoms cohesive, the obstacle loses its density. It begins to crumble. Toxic people move away by inertia. They seek another organism that will give them the heat you deny them. Crises dissolve into nothingness. Contempt is not an attitude of social arrogance. It is a maneuver of physical annihilation. You kill your demons simply by refusing to look at them. You starve them of the thermal energy they need to exist. The discipline of the anvil. The thermodynamics of attention demands that you become a jealous, selfish, and ruthless guardian of your own gaze. Your caloric energy is not an infinite resource. Each hour of your life is a fixed amount of fire. From this moment on, you must audit your vision with the coldness of an accountant. Where are you pointing the lens at this very instant? Are you illuminating the construction of your empire, or are you heating the trash of others? Hold the lens, anchor your feet to the ground. Feel the weight of gravity pulling at you, and resist. When the outside world screams, close your heavy doors. Keep the magnifying glass fixed on your objective. Do not blink. Do not yield a single millimeter. Let the light concentrate until the paper of reality begins to smoke under your steel gaze. Where the gaseous man sees darkness and surrenders, the monarch fixes his sight and lights the forge. The extraction of kinetic sovereignty. To master this fire, you must also understand the concept of kinetic sovereignty. Most of your heat is stolen through micro-leakages. Every time you check a notification out of habit, you leak thermal energy. Every time you explain your actions to someone who lacks mass, you dissipate your internal pressure. These are the parasitic drains of the matrix. They are designed to keep your temperature just below the boiling point, ensuring you remain in a perpetual state of lukewarm compliance. The monarch practices energy hoarding. He treats his attention as a weapon of mass destruction that is only unholstered. It is only used for specific, high-magnitude strikes. This hoarding creates an internal pressure that the biomass interprets as presence. When you enter a room with your thermal valves closed, the air feels heavier. This is not a metaphor. You have physically increased the local density of your field. By refusing to scatter your gaze, you force the environment to orbit you. The objects and people within your radius will begin to align themselves with your silent command, not because they want to, but because your gravitational pull is mathematically superior to their erratic Brownian motion. The final stage of this mastery is the unblinking render. Once the target has begun to smoke under your focused gaze, do not look away to see if it's working. That split second of checking for results is a flicker in the laser that allows the material to cool. Hold the point until the target is fully forged. Your world is a mirror of your thermal consistency. If you are a laser, reality is glass to be cut. If you are a candle in the wind, reality is a dark and cold wall. Close your eyes to the distractions, open your internal furnace, and melt the hologram until it takes the shape of your throne. Chapter 5. The Blind Architect and Fulfilled Prophecies. The Cast Iron Mold. The history of civilization is plagued by sterile laments. If you walk the streets of any metropolis and listen carefully, you will hear the incessant murmur of the biomass complaining about their luck. A man cries because he has been betrayed again. A woman laments because economic misery always ends up knocking down her door. They look up at the sky and ask the void why the universe is so cruel, why the stone always falls on their heads. They ignore the most ruthless law of the forge. The universe has no will of its own to punish or reward. The material universe is simply molten lead, boiling and liquid, waiting to be poured into a mold, and the mold is your expectation. Here lies the absolute horror of fulfilled prophecies. You are not a seer who guesses that things will go wrong. You are the blacksmith who manufactures the cast iron container with the exact shape of the disaster, and then steps aside to see how the inertia of the cosmos pours the boiling lead inside it. Expectation is not a passive opinion. It is an architectural structure. It is a physical containment box. When you wake up in the morning convinced that you will be betrayed, that the money will not be enough, or that disease haunts you, your attention, charged with that expectation, deforms the fog of quantum possibilities. You dig a pit with a specific geometry. The atmospheric pressure of your fear is so heavy that it forces matter to precipitate and fill that gap. At the end of the day, when the betrayal occurs and the ruin crystallizes, the gaseous man sighs, shrugs his shoulders, and says, "I knew it. I knew this was going to happen." He says it with a pathetic pride, not realizing his crime. He does not realize that he has just confessed his own thermodynamic crime. You didn't know it. You ordered it. You are a blind architect who designs prisons, locks himself in them, and then curses the solidity of the bars. The acoustics of prophecy, the L-room trap. To understand how an expectation solidifies into a physical fact, we must return to the science of sound and the treatment of interior space. The self-fulfilling prophecy is not magic. It is pure physics of reverberation. In previous chapters, we established that an untreated mind acts as an asymmetrical room, an L-shaped room. In a room with this capricious geometry, sound waves do not flow cleanly. They collide, bounce, and accumulate in blind corners, generating destructive and deafening echoes. The expectation of disaster is a low-frequency shock wave. Suppose you start a project or a relationship, but in your core you carry the hidden expectation of failure. You utter words of hope, but your internal pressure vibrates in the frequency of terror. You have emitted a deep, heavy sound in that L-shaped room. The wave of fear hits a wall, bounces, and travels to the blind hallways of your mind. There, the sound accumulates and forms a standing wave. your behavior begins to change subtly. Since you expect betrayal, your body tenses, your words become defensive, your gaze becomes paranoid and erratic. You begin to treat your environment not for what it is, but for the deafening echo of what you fear it to be. This constant friction pushes the environment to the limit of its structural resistance. In the end, the people around you, suffocated by the negative gravity of your suspicions, end up yielding to inertia and betray or abandon you. The glass breaks, but not because someone threw a stone from outside. It breaks because you yourself sang the note of destruction with such insistence that resonance shattered the glass. The Pygmalion effect forged on an anvil. Classical psychology calls this phenomenon the Pygmalion effect. They claim that the expectations one person has about another directly influence the performance of that other person. Treat a man like a thief, and he will end up stealing. Treat him like a genius, and his intellect will expand, but they explain it from emotion. The physics of conscious matter explains it from the tyranny of gravity. It is not about psychological suggestion, it is about mass transfer. Every living being, every event and every project that enters your ecosystem is, in its initial state, malleable matter. It is fog. When you fix your gaze on that fog with an immovable expectation, you are injecting weight into it. You are forcing it to adopt your center of gravity. If you observe an adversary and secretly consider him invincible, your gaze transfers power to him. You give him your thermal energy to forge his own armor. If you observe a business and expect ruin, you are removing the load-bearing pillars. The architect of conscious matter reverses this effect with an icy hostility. The monarch does not look at the world to discover what shape it has. The monarch looks at the world to inform it what shape it must adopt. When you face a challenge, your expectation cannot be a statistical calculation of probabilities. Your expectation must be an absolute mandate, a block of lead. You treat victory as a fait accompli that already occupies a physical volume in your space. The atmospheric pressure of an absolute certainty is so immense that surrounding matter has no choice but to curve toward it. The lead fills the mold of triumph. The dictatorship of expectation and echo isolation. To govern these laws, you must annihilate a vice deeply rooted in the biomass, the habit of vocalizing weakness. A prophecy begins to fulfill itself the exact moment you utter it out loud. Sound is matter in motion. When an individual says, "I have a feeling this will go wrong," they are emitting a mechanical vibration. They are emitting a vibration that alters the air molecules. They are pouring fresh concrete over the blueprint of ruin. The discipline of charged immobility demands that you close your mouth. If you feel the cold of doubt, if the inertia of the past tries to whisper a prophecy of failure, you must suffocate that sound. Do not give it volume. Do not give it acoustics. Kill it in the anechoic silence of your isolation. Swallow the doubt and turn it into internal heat. You must make your mind an armored chamber, lined with thick, phono-absorbent panels of mineral wool where the complaint cannot bounce. If you design the acoustics of your room so that the sound of misfortune dies instantly upon hitting the wall of your indifference, you have withdrawn all creative power from the prophecy. Fear without echo is a weightless ghost. Instead of vocalizing doubt, the architect of his destiny only opens his mouth to drive the chisel. His words are few, heavy, and definitive. He speaks of his future not in terms of hope, which is the gas of the weak, but in terms of architecture. He speaks of foundations, of load-bearing beams, of laws of gravity, and of empirical results. He dictates the geometry of the coming render. The price of certainty. Assuming this level of responsibility crushes cowards. Biomass is terrified to accept that they are the absolute architects of their misery, because if they admit it, they lose the right to compassion. They lose the right to cry on the tribe's shoulder. They run out of excuses. You must embrace that loss. When you stop being the blind architect, you discover that the pressure is immense. If the universe delivers a failure, you must stand before the obsidian mirror, look your own reflection in the eyes, and admit, with the coldness of a surgeon, that it was you who forged that mold. There was a crack in your expectation. There was a millisecond in which you blinked and let panic guide your gaze. Do not flagellate yourself. Guilt is another useless vibration that only generates asymmetric echoes. Use failure as pure telemetry. Check the blueprints. Detect where you left a dead corner in the acoustics of your will. Adjust the panels. Reinforce the walls. Lower your center of gravity and drive your attention back into the anvil of reality. This time, forge the cast iron mold with such perfection that the universe has no other thermodynamic choice but to fill it with solid gold. Reality is not punishing you. It is a blind servant building the building. Toss the sketches of fear into the trash, take the pen, and begin to trace the geometry of the empire. The solidification of the primary directive. Once you have cleared the blueprints of your mind, you must issue a primary directive. This is the core expectation that acts as the main load-bearing wall of your reality. In the world of the gaseous man, there are thousands of contradictory directives. I want to be rich, but I'm afraid of taxes. Or, I want love, but I don't trust anyone. These are acoustic collisions. They create a phase cancellation in the field of probability. The result is a flat, grey line, nothingness. The monarch issues a single coherent directive. It is a wave of such immense magnitude that it overwrites all minor interference. You must become a monochromatic laser of expectation. This directive must be reinforced daily in the silence of your anechoic chamber. You do not rehearse the directive, you inhabit it. You walk through your house as if the empire were already built. You handle your current resources with the weight and gravity of the future abundance. You are preloading the hardware. The material world is slow. It has a high refresh rate latency. If you change your directive every time you see a small delay, the render fails. You must maintain the pressure until the atoms yield. The blind architect becomes the master builder when he realizes that his internal certainty is the only real thing in the room. The external world is merely a delayed projection of your internal pressure. If the projection doesn't match your plans yet, you don't adjust the plans. You increase the pressure. You tighten the valves. You solidify the expectation until it becomes an environmental law that the matrix cannot ignore. The structural integrity of the will. To maintain this architecture, you must also master structural integrity. Every person you interact with is a potential source of acoustic leakage. When you tell a gaseous person about your plans, their doubt acts as a corrosive agent. Their low-frequency vibration eats away at your concrete. This is why the monarch remains silent. He does not seek feedback, because the opinion of an open system is thermodynamically irrelevant to a closed system. Your will must be an airtight vessel. If you let others peek into your blueprints, you are giving them the opportunity to introduce structural flaws. Your expectation is your private property. It is the secret code of your simulation. Guard it with the same ferocity that a bank guards its gold. When you are out in the world, present only the finished surface of your obsidian armor. Let the biomass see the result, but never the process of the forge. By keeping your directive hidden, you prevent external interference from causing harmonic distortion. Your will remains pure, resonant, and lethal. The universe responds to this purity with a rapid collapse of the probability wave. The architecture of your life begins to align itself with your silent decrees. Walls rise where you need them, obstacles crumble into dust. The path is cleared not by luck, but by the sheer mass of your unshakable expectation. You have become the master architect, and the universe is finally building according to your true designs. The era of the blind builder is over. Chapter 6. The Weight of Certainty. The Thermal Scam of Hope. In the vast and chaotic theater of humanity, an invisible poison exists that the masses consume daily with pathetic devotion. They call it hope. Poets, philosophers of weakness, and shepherds of biomass have elevated hope to a sacred virtue. They taught ordinary man that when cornered by misery, hope is his only lifesaver. The physics of power, the unbribable science of conscious matter, classifies hope as the most destructive thermodynamic fraud in history. Let us analyze the anatomy of hope through fluid mechanics. Hope is a gas. It is volatile, lacks mass, has no geometric structure, and dissipates with the first gust of icy wind. When an individual hopes for success or for poverty to leave his house, he is making a grave biological confession. He is empirically admitting he has no control. By hoping, you declare yourself a beggar at the gates of creation. You cede authority to chance. You tell the material universe, I am a light, unanchored object. Please do not crush me with your inertia. The universe, a blind and deaf machinery that only respects mass and density, completely ignores the pleas of weak gases. Hope emits a frequency so shrill, so piteous, and so weightless that it fails to curve the fabric of reality by even a millimeter. He who lives on hope dies of cold. Hope does not produce heat, it only dissipates it. Against this thermal scam stands the only force capable of subjecting matter: certainty. Certainty is not a mood. It is not positive thinking or a naive smile in the face of adversity. Certainty is a physical magnitude. It is a 1,000-ton lead block in your chest. It is charged immobility in its maximum expression. While hope begs for the future to be kind, certainty decrees that the present has already been conquered. Hope floats, certainty crushes. The acoustics of pleading versus the frequency of command. To master the weight of certainty, we must return to the laws of acoustics. Imagine the difference between the sound of a violin played by trembling hands and the deep, dull impact of a steel sledgehammer hitting a load-bearing beam in the foundations of a skyscraper. When biomass tries to alter reality, they use pleading. I hope this works, they say. That hope is a high-pitched squeak. High frequencies are directional, fragile, and easily blocked by physical obstacles. A simple drywall stops the sound of a whistle. Similarly, the first obstacle life presents, a rejection or a delay, completely blocks their hope. The echo dies, and they collapse. The quantum monarch does not plead. The monarch emits commands, and the command is emitted in the strictest sub-bass frequency. Low frequencies, like those of an earthquake or a cargo ship's engine, cannot be blocked by thin walls. Sub-bass waves pass through concrete, steel, and earth. They are felt in the marrow of the bones. When you forge absolute certainty inside your mental anechoic chamber, you do not need to shout your victory. Certainty is silent, but it possesses a vibration so heavy and deep that it alters the barometric pressure of any room you enter. When the monarch decides a territory is his, that decision resonates in the beams of the universe. The command admits no debate. The universe receives that seismic wave, and lacking the structural capacity to resist such a dense frequency, begins to crack and readjust its pieces to obey. The inertia of heavy matter, the delay of the physical world. The greatest challenge for the initiate in conscious matter is understanding the friction of time. This is where the weak abandon the forge. The human mind operates at the speed of light. In the exact millisecond, you fix your gaze on the fog and apply the weight of your certainty. The wave collapses. In the plane of probability, reality has already been altered. You are already the victor. You already possess what you decreed. However, the three-dimensional physical world is not made of pure light. It is made of dense, heavy matter subject to the laws of inertia. If you turn the rudder of a small rowboat, it turns instantly. But if you command a 300,000-ton supertanker and turn the rudder, the colossal ship will take minutes, even nautical miles, to modify its trajectory. The inertia of its immense physical mass offers resistance. The outer universe is that supertanker. When you drop the lead block of certainty, the order is given. But physical matter, money, people, contracts, requires time to reorganize, move through the friction of the world, and assemble into the geometry you just imposed. We call this the physical delay of matter. During this delay, the external stage will look exactly the same as yesterday. The world will try to deceive you. Your bank account will show the same empty number. The environment will still seem hostile. Your problems will still cast long shadows. It is in this temporal gap where the weight of certainty must be absolute. The myopia of evidence and the isolation of the senses. Human biomass suffers from a lethal existential myopia. They need to see physical evidence to believe. They are slaves to the mirror. They stand before reality, look at their empty pockets or sick body, and conclude, this is the truth. By accepting current misery as truth, their gaze collapses the fog into misery again. This traps them in an infinite loop of destructive thermal feedback. Cold generates more cold. The architect of conscious matter reverses this biological mechanism with brutal tyranny. The monarch does not look at the physical world for evidence of triumph. He understands the outer world is the delayed echo of past certainties. What you see today in your life is the corpse of the lead you poured yesterday. If your life is a mess today, it is only because last week or last year you were vibrating in the frequency of defeat. Therefore, certainty demands the temporal amputation of the senses. It demands voluntary blindness. When you have decreed a sovereign order in the silence of your mind, you become blind to contrary evidence of the present. If the universe shows a temporary obstacle while it reorganizes heavy matter, you do not panic. You do not assume your mandate failed. You apply optical asphyxiation. You look with indifference. You look as a sculptor looks at the marble debris falling to the floor. You know that resistance is only the friction of heavy matter adjusting to your new gravity. You maintain charged immobility. You do not complain. You do not alter your deep breathing. You endure the weight of the void and the apparent stillness of the cosmos. You know that beneath the surface, the tectonic plates of your reality are creaking under the sub-base pressure of your decree. You believe you have certainty to force matter to show itself. You are the source of light. The world is only the wall where it is projected. Forging under pressure, turning coal into diamond. Sometimes the resistance of the physical world is not a simple delay, it is a frontal assault. When you drastically alter the acoustics of your life and move from pleading to absolute authority, the ecosystem around you will experience a thermal shock. People who benefited from your gaseous weakness will try to subdue you. Unexpected logistical crises will arise. It will seem the entire universe rises in arms to crush your new certainty. The coward interprets this as a cosmic sign that he has taken the wrong path and must retreat to the safety of complaining. The operator of conscious matter interprets this as the necessary pressure. It is the pressure chamber required for supreme crystallization. Deep in the earth, coal and diamond are composed of the exact same basic element. The only difference between a black stone and the most indestructible gem is the immense, crushing and ruthless atmospheric pressure and heat they endured in the dark. When crisis hits after you emit a mandate of certainty, the universe is not punishing you. It is behaving like the Earth's crust. It is applying pressure. It is verifying the density of your lead block. If your certainty is false, if it was just hope disguised as arrogance, you will break like coal. You will turn to dust. But if you remain in the anechoic silence of your tactical isolation, if you keep your back straight and hold the obsidian gaze without a single complaint, thermal pressure will begin to transmute you. Terror burns, doubt evaporates, the weak structures of your mind collapse, and only the unshakable core remains. You become a thermodynamic diamond, an object of such density and hardness that nothing in the three-dimensional world can scratch, alter, or destroy it. The gravitational collapse of your ecosystem. The final goal of assimilating the weight of certainty is not simply to endure life with stoicism. Stoicism is the philosophy of shields. Conscious matter is the philosophy of the anvil and the hammer. When you manage to keep your certainty intact through the delay of matter and the pressure of crisis, a collapse occurs. The gravitational collapse of your ecosystem is triggered. The acoustic and thermal tension you accumulated by not reacting reaches its critical mass. The material universe exhausts its resistances. The laws of inertia surrender to the law of superior gravity. Suddenly, violently and mathematically, matter assembles. Obstacles that seemed like impenetrable concrete walls dissolve like simple clouds of vapor. Doors that were hermetically sealed open by the inertia of those who need you. The biomass that challenged you bows its head and submits to your orbit, caught in your gravitational field. Wealth and power leave their positions. They fall attracted toward the hyperdense core you forged at the center of your being. It has not been luck. It has not been fate intervening out of pity. You applied the weight of certainty until you forced the matrix of reality to curve space and time at your feet. You stopped begging on the ice plane. You lit the forge with your attention and forged reality with hammer blows of silence and authority. That is the power of the monarch. That is the non-negotiable reward of those who refuse to be biomass and embrace, with all its lethal consequences, the crushing weight of absolute truth. Chapter 7. Tactical Blindness, the Art of Not Looking. The Oxygen of Catastrophe. In the science of combustion, a forest fire that raises thousands of hectares and melts the steel of human structures cannot exist by itself. No matter how intense the heat, no matter how dry the wood, the fire is subject to an irrefutable biological weakness. It needs oxygen. If you take the most destructive bonfire on the planet, and you enclose it in a vacuum chamber, depriving it of air, the fire does not defend itself. It does not fight. It simply suffocates in a matter of seconds and dies, leaving behind a pile of cold and pathetic ashes. Adversity in the physical world operates exactly under this same law. It is a thermodynamic principle. Debts, crises, enemies, terrifying medical diagnoses, and betrayals do not possess their own energy. They are inert embers in the ocean of quantum fog. To become fires that devour your peace and destroy your empire, they desperately need a constant flow of oxygen. In the physics of conscious matter, the oxygen of catastrophe is your attention. Ordinary man, the common biomass, is a pyromaniac of his own life. When a problem rears its head on his horizon, his scared mammalian instinct orders him to fix his eyes on the threat. They begin to observe the crisis from all angles. They talk about it at breakfast. They complain about it with their neighbors. They spend whole nights awake, staring at it in the darkness of their rooms. They believe that by looking at the problem, they are being responsible or realistic. They believe they are looking for a solution. Quantum physics demonstrates the terrifying truth. By looking at the problem with such intensity, they are blowing. They blow with iron bellows upon a spark. They are transferring the immense gravity of their gaze. They are giving it mass. They are injecting all the thermodynamic oxygen that the tragedy needs to solidify and crush them. For the monarch, the solution to a fire is not throwing buckets of water in a fit of hysteria. The supreme solution is the amputation of air. It is the implacable execution of tactical blindness. The vampirism of low frequency. To master the art of not looking, you must first understand the parasitic nature of the outside world. Everything that vibrates in low density, toxic people, social drama, absurd bureaucracy, the chaos of the crowds, lacks its own center of gravity. They are hollow structures. They are shells without mass. Having no weight, the universe does not orbit around them. Therefore, to survive in the architecture of the physical world, they need to steal gravity from denser organisms. They are thermal vampires. How does a thermal vampire steal your energy? By forcing you to look at it. It is an ocular transaction. When a person insults you, they do not seek to hurt you physically. They seek for your gaze to cross theirs. They seek for your creative fire to be diverted toward them. When the media sows panic, they use strobe lights, strident headlines, and high frequencies to hijack your pupils and your mind. They know that in the millisecond you rest your gaze on their chaos, a quantum bridge is established. Through that bridge of attention, your vital energy, your heat, and your mass begin to drain toward them. You give them density. You make them real. If you argue with a fool, you have just validated his existence. If you defend yourself against an absurd accusation, you have just injected cement into your accuser's words. By defending yourself, you are telling the cosmos, "This threat is real, so real that I must spend my calories fighting it." And the cosmos, obediently, solidifies the threat into stone. The anatomy of absolute contempt. Tactical blindness is the guillotine that cuts the quantum bridge. It is the violent and categorical refusal to give the heat of your gaze to any element that does not belong to the architecture of your empire. But beware. Biomass confuses tactical blindness with cowardice. They think ignoring is hiding. They believe ignoring a problem is like the ostrich hiding its head in a hole while its body trembles with terror. The ostrich hides its sight, but its nervous system remains saturated with fear. Its inner acoustics keep screaming. The ostrich continues to transfer mass to the predator through panic. The monarch does not hide his head. The monarch lifts his chin, anchors his feet in the foundations of the earth, keeps his eyes wide open, and decides, with the coldness of a surgeon, to look through the problem. You do not run from the crisis. You pass over it with your sight. You are the superior observer. Imagine you are in your room, forging a decree of victory, and an annoying insect begins to buzz around you. If you get up, scream, wave your arms, and try to hunt it, the insect has governed your body. It has destroyed your charged immobility. But if you remain upright, breathing in sub-bass frequency, if you treat the insect's buzzing as if it were the distant echo of a dimension that does not belong to you, the insect becomes irrelevant. It loses its impact. Tactical blindness is absolute contempt turned into physical law. It is standing before an adversary or an impossible bill with empty eyes. You look at them with obsidian eyes so empty, so aseptic, and so devoid of emotional heat that the problem feels ignored by the very fabric of space-time. You are saying to the quantum fog, "I do not recognize you. You do not possess enough density to interrupt my landscape. To me, you are transparent." Death by freezing, absolute zero. What occurs empirically in the three-dimensional world when you successfully apply this optical asphyxiation? The process is one of the most majestic and terrifying phenomena of thermodynamics. Every physical object, every crisis, and every parasitic relationship is held together by the friction of the energy it receives. When you cut off the supply of your attention, you invoke absolute zero. Absolute zero, 273.15°C, is the theoretical point in physics where the movement of subatomic particles stops completely. There is no heat. There is no vibration. There is no life. By applying tactical blindness, you submerge problems. You submerge them in absolute zero. Since the universe does not perceive that you are injecting mass into that sector of your reality, it assumes that sector is dead weight. The probability wave that had collapsed to form the monster of your crisis begins to lose its molecular cohesion. The stone pebble turns back into an amorphous fog. You will observe how enemies who tried to destroy you suddenly lose interest or destroy themselves in their own entropy. You will observe how the debts that suffocated you are diluted in agreements, mathematical coincidences, or improbable rescues. You will observe how doors that had been closed with iron locks fall off their hinges because the screws have disintegrated for lack of friction. The obstacle dies by freezing. It withers, turns into ash dust, and the wind of the universe sweeps it from your coordinates. You have annihilated it. You destroyed the threat without having lifted a single finger in an attack position. You destroyed it through the pure, hard, and relentless weight of your geometric indifference. The architect's radar, selection of focus. To execute this level of passive destruction, your mind must operate like a military-grade radar, calibrated to ignore static and detect only high-density targets. Ordinary man has a defective radar. His screen lights up with thousands of bright red dots. The neighbor's opinion, fuel prices, or criticism. They attend to all those points, and their processor collapses. The monarch's radar is clean. On the obsidian screen of your consciousness, you only allow a single mathematical point to shine: the crystallization of your empire, your purpose, your unbreakable health, your absolute sovereignty. It is the signal. Any element that does not exactly match the trajectory of your building is immediately catalogued as transparent fog, and you do not look at fog, you pass through it. If your goal is to forge iron health and your body shows a symptom of weakness, you do not fix your eyes on the disease. If you do, you expand it. You apply tactical blindness to the symptom, not denying it exists in the current physical plane, but refusing to grant it the title of permanent reality. You look through the physical ailment, focusing all the heat of your hammer on the certainty of your cellular regeneration. If your goal is financial domination, and the bank account shows scarcity, you apply the optical guillotine. You do not check the zero balances with panic. You become blind to the poverty of the present. You withdraw the oxygen from the lack and put all your creative fire in the image of abundance. The void does not admit cowards. Tactical blindness is, without a doubt, the most unnatural maneuver that conscious matter demands of human biology. Your reptilian brain, forged over millennia to watch the bushes for predators, will beg you to look at the danger. It will inject you with adrenaline. It will make your hands sweat. It will make your heart beat with the acoustics of a drum to force you to pay attention to chaos. Overcoming that biological inertia hurts. Maintaining charged immobility while the world around you screams to look at the disaster requires a strength of will that borders on cruelty. You must be cruel. You must be cruel to your own fears. You must strangle your own animal survival instinct. But the reward of this optical asphyxiation is absolute power. When you master the art of not looking, when you are able to stand in the middle of the ruins of a crisis with flames licking your shoes, when you can keep your cold and empty eyes fixed exclusively on the horizon of your victory, the three-dimensional universe will surrender. It will understand once and for all that it cannot extort you with fear. It will understand that you are not biomass reacting to the shadows of the cave. It will see in you the architect deaf and blind to misery, wielding the hammer of certainty. And being unable to scare you into forging your own ruin, heavy matter will have no choice but to bow and begin to place the stones of your palace. The dissolution of the mirror. The final stage of tactical blindness is the dissolution of the mirror. In the beginning, the operator uses blindness to avoid the negative, but the master uses it to erase the concept of external altogether. When you no longer look at the obstacle, you realize the obstacle was only a reflection of a thermal leakage within. By refusing to acknowledge the parasite, you're actually closing the hole in your own hull. This is the aseptic state. You move through the world with a sensory filter so refined that only that which matches your internal vibration is rendered into high-definition reality. The rest appears as low-resolution static. The biomass interprets this as luck or divine protection, but it is simply a matter of rendering priority. Your mind, functioning as the primary GPU of your reality, refuses to allocate processing power to anything that does not serve the monarch. You are literally deleting the garbage from your simulation. This allows you to maintain a state of maximum thermal efficiency. While others are exhausted by the noise of the world, you are rested, cold, and ready. You have saved all your oxygen for the grand construction. The vacuum you created by not looking at the trash is now being filled by the gold of your focus. Remember, the void is a hungry force. By applying tactical blindness to the old world, you create a gravitational vacuum that pulls the new world toward you. You do not have to go looking for your empire will fall into the space you cleared when you stopped looking at the ruins. Chapter 8. The Forging of the Black Mirror. The great farce of the independent landscape. Ordinary human beings, the biomass that wanders dragging its feet upon the earth, live submerged in a colossal optical hallucination. When they open their eyes in the morning, they believe they are entering a landscape. They perceive the external world, buildings, passers-by, economic crises, as an independent stage. They see a theater of stone and flesh that was already there before they arrived and will remain when they leave. They believe they are mere tiny explorers crossing a territory that does not belong to them, crossing their fingers so the day's weather does not annihilate them. This conception is not just a surrender, it is a thermodynamic aberration. The observer paradox tears this veil from our eyes with the violence of a gale. The three-dimensional universe you step on is not a passive stage. The physical world surrounding you in this precise millisecond is not a landscape. It is an immense and suffocating obsidian glass. Imagine a sphere of volcanic crystal, dark and polished. It surrounds you 360 degrees. There is no outside, there is no horizon. Everything you see, everything you touch, and every individual that crosses your path are nothing more than the optical and gravitational bounces of your own mass hitting the walls of this black mirror. The universe is reflecting you with chilling fidelity. The physics of obsidian and gravitational bounce. Why do we use obsidian to describe the frontier of reality? Obsidian is no ordinary glass. It is volcanic glass. It is forged in the depths of the earth under infernal temperatures and crushing pressures, cooling so rapidly that its atoms have no time to form an ordinary crystalline structure. The result is a black stone. It is a dense stone, capable of an edge sharper than surgical steel. The universe is exactly like that. Dark, implacable, forged in the pressure of the vacuum and sharpened at the subatomic level. When you stand before an ordinary silver mirror in your bathroom, the glass returns the image of your face and the clothes you wear. It is a superficial bounce of light. But the immense black mirror of the cosmos does not bounce photons, it bounces gravity. It does not reflect the shape of your nose, it reflects the posture of your skeleton, the density of your chest, and the acoustic frequency of your soul. If you understand this, victimhood collapses into dust. If the environment is hostile, it is not because society is cruel, it is because the black mirror is returning the strident hostility that you yourself are projecting. If you live surrounded by lack, it is because the obsidian has captured the low frequency of your fear and is returning the exact image of your own ruin. The crystal has no mercy. It is a calculation surface. It delivers to you, gram for gram, the exact weight that you throw at it. The tyranny of physical posture. The most potent tool you possess to interact with this black mirror is not your abstract thought. Thought is often an erratic gas. The true measuring stick of your density, the anchor that tells the universe who you are, is your physical body, your posture, your skeleton of calcium and your muscles in tension. Observe the multitudes. The biomass walks hunched over, their shoulders fall forward, collapsing the rib cage, protecting their vital organs in a primitive gesture of mammalian submission. They keep their gaze fixed on the ground, shunning contact with the horizon. Their breathing is superficial, agitated, and confined. What gravitational message does this body send to the obsidian mirror? It is screaming, "I am weak. I possess no mass. I am a light and terrified object ready to be crushed." And the physics of reflection obeys immediately. The mirror takes that posture of weakness and multiplies it by the immense size of the cosmos. It projects it back onto the individual in the form of oppressive circumstances. Tyrant bosses, abusive partners, and unpayable debts. The whole world becomes a lead boot stepping on the neck of the hunched man. And the man, in his ignorance, hunches even more. It is an anatomical suicide. The architect of conscious matter understands that physical posture is a thermodynamic decree. When you stand up, you must do so by defying the Earth's gravity. You must align your spine as if it were a tungsten steel pillar embedded in the planet's foundations. You pull your shoulders back, expanding the vault of your chest. You expose your vital organs to the world without a single drop of fear. You lift your chin until your gaze is perfectly parallel to the ground. You breathe deeply, filling the diaphragm, establishing the slow and sub-bass rhythm of a predator at rest. In that exact instant, the impact against the mirror is colossal. The obsidian receives the shockwave of a monarch. It registers a massive, dense, immovable object devoid of terror. And the universe, programmed mechanically to balance equations, has no choice but to return an external world that fits that posture. The environment squares up before you. Crowds instinctively step aside on the sidewalk. Negotiations bend in your favor. The mirror returns a landscape of undeniable submission because external matter cannot crush he who holds himself as the first cause. The sub-bass frequency of the soul. If the posture of your body dictates the structure of the reflection, the vibration of your soul dictates the texture of the event. I do not mean the soul in poetic or religious terms. I mean the core of your conscious will, the thermal engine of your existence. This engine emits a constant sound. It is a hum that the biomass does not hear, but that the black mirror absorbs and processes incessantly. When a man lives in a state of hope, of need and of urgency, his engine emits a very high and shrill frequency. It is the sound of panic. It is the sound of scarcity. I need money. I need love. This shriek hits the volcanic glass, but high frequencies have no penetrating force. They break upon contact. The mirror rejects them and returns a sterile silence, or worse, returns circumstances that generate more need and more panic to maintain the resonance. The monarch does not emit shrieks. Forged in tactical isolation, his thermal engine runs at idle with a sub-bass frequency so deep it makes the stone tremble. That frequency is absolute certainty. The architect's soul asks nothing of the mirror. He stands before the dark crystal and emits a single heavy tone. I possess. I rule. I am gravity. This sub-bass vibration does not bounce superficially. It penetrates the atomic structure of the obsidian. It makes it vibrate in sympathy. By imposing your deep frequency on the world's matter, you make external circumstances, economy, health, the wills of others, resonate in unison with your mandate. The mirror does not grant you wishes. The mirror becomes the slave of your vibration, the unbribable tribunal of the mirror. There is an implicit terror in living under this law, which is why weak men flee from quantum physics toward the comfort of religions or chance. If the universe is a black obsidian mirror, then you stand before an unbribable tribunal from which there is no escape. You are the sole person responsible. If your life is a humiliating disaster, you can no longer point your finger at the government, your family, or the crisis. If the landscape you see around you is a hell, it is solely and exclusively because you have stood before the crystal with the posture of a coward and the vibration of a slave. The hell you inhabit is of your own making. This discovery destroys the biomass. They cannot bear the weight of being the authors of their own suffering. But for you, forging conscious matter, this truth is the master key of creation. The mirror does not judge your past. The obsidian has no memory of who you were yesterday. It only responds to the mass you present in the microscopic now. If in this precise instant you decide to anchor your feet, straighten your spine, and silence the shrill noise of your anxiety, the mirror has no choice but to update the reflection. The inertia of heavy matter may take a few days to reorder the debris, the physical world delay, but the sentence has already been handed down. You have won. Breaking the illusion of the other. The last and most painful veil the black mirror forces you to tear is the illusion of the other. Throughout your life, you have believed that the people who hurt you, betray you, or oppose you are separate entities, independent villains in the play of your life. The observer paradox ends this fantasy. The man who insults you, the woman who abandons you, the partner who steals, they are not foreign forces. They are fragments of the black mirror reflecting your own hidden cracks. They are the physical bounce of your deepest doubts. If an enemy manages to enter your ecosystem, it is because you left a door open. You left a thermal vulnerability, a secret fear, and the universe materialized that person specifically to show you your own weakness. When you understand this, hatred for others disappears. Anger against those who hurt you is revealed as a major stupidity. It is like punching the bathroom mirror. You will only manage to cut your hands. The monarch does not take revenge on reflections. The monarch corrects the posture of his own body. If someone lacks respect for you, you do not enter the mud of discussion. You withdraw to anechoic silence. You check the density of your core. Find the leak of insecurity that allowed that lack of respect to materialize and seal it with molten lead. Increase your mass. Harden your posture. And upon looking at the mirror again, you will see the aggressor has vanished or prostrated before you, unable to sustain hostility against a titanium wall. The world is made of obsidian. It does not pity you, it does not save you, and it does not punish you. Simply, it obeys you. Assume the weight of your own image, lift your gaze, and demand the unconditional surrender of the landscape. Chapter 9. Traversing the Desert of Ash. The thermodynamics of demolition. A deeply rooted infantile terror exists within the mind of the biomass. The belief that personal evolution is a peaceful process, a soft transition where the individual simply improves while the world applauds. The philosophy of weakness has taught them that inner peace brings an immediate harmony with the environment. The physics of conscious matter spits upon that fantasy. In the implacable laws of structural architecture, you cannot build a tungsten steel skyscraper upon the rotten foundations of a wooden shack. If you attempt to place a 10-ton load-bearing beam on a damp plaster wall, the structure will collapse and crush you. For the new building to occupy its volume in space, the old building must be demolished to its foundations. It must be reduced to rubble. When you assume the weight of certainty and alter the acoustics of your mind, when you install the heavy panels of non-reaction and begin to look at the ocean of quantum fog with gravity, you become hyperdense. And the first empirical effect of this new density is not the creation of your empire, but the violent and inevitable annihilation of your previous ecosystem. Welcome to the desert of ash. Everything in your life built on the vibration of scarcity or the fear of loneliness will begin to burn. Sterile relationships maintained by thermal inertia, mediocre jobs tolerated out of terror of poverty, and empty routines used to anesthetize your anguish will not withstand your new gravity. They will crack. It is not a punishment from the universe, it is a simple calculation of the resistance of materials. The old reality was fragile, sustained by the friction of your doubts. By withdrawing doubt and applying icy certainty, that reality loses its molecular cohesion. It disintegrates and falls at your feet, turned into black dust. The collapse of the asymmetrical room. For years, your mind operated like that L-shaped room we discussed in previous chapters. An asymmetrical space, without phono-absorbent treatment, where the echo of others' fears and your own bounced incessantly, accumulating parasitic frequencies in blind corners. You attracted people who resonated with that noise. By demolishing that room and building your anechoic chamber of absolute silence, you have withdrawn their oxygen. You will observe, with almost clinical coldness, how certain people around you panic. They will try to provoke you, they will hurl insults, dramas, or sharp demands trying to make you react. They desperately seek for you to emit the low-resolution noise they used to feed on. They want you to be the victim again so they can continue being your executioners or companions in misery. When they crash against your charged immobility, when their complaints bounce off your silence and die, they will flee. The gaseous man cries over these losses. He feels the world is abandoning him. But the operator of conscious matter observes the smoking debris of old friendships and failed projects with the contempt of an emperor. He knows ash is the fertilizer of the empire. If they burned, it is because they were made of paper. Soul necrophilia and the poison of nostalgia. Walking through this devastated landscape, where the old reality has died but the new geometry has not yet fully crystallized, you will face the most lethal and silent enemy of all. It does not come from outside, it comes from the lowest instincts of your own biology. It is nostalgia. Nostalgia is not a romantic feeling. In the physics of power, nostalgia is pure necrophilia of the soul. It is the repulsive act of digging up a corpse because you miss the warmth of past friction. When the weight of the vacuum settles around you in the desert of ash, your mammalian mind will suffer withdrawal. The aseptic silence of your inner chamber will be terrifying to your primitive biology, which was addicted to the adrenaline of problems and the noise of the tribe. Your own brain will try to seduce you into looking back. It will whisper that before, even if you were miserable, at least you were accompanied. If in the desert of ash you turn your head to look at the ruins with longing, you are committing thermodynamic suicide. Remember the fundamental law of wave collapse. Where you place the hammer of your attention, you inject mass. If you observe your past with pain, you are breathing life into a corpse. You are trying to reverse combustion, which breaks the laws of entropy. You will be paralyzed in the desert, turned into a pillar of salt, spending your fire heating dead memories while your future freezes on the ice plain. The monarch's discipline demands the total amputation of the rearview mirror. What burned had to burn. Debris does not deserve the dignity of your gaze. Your attention is an industrial laser too valuable to waste illuminating ruins. Fix your eyes forward, toward the horizon where the new quantum fog awaits your orders, and walk over the ash without altering your deep breathing. The weight of the void and the ecstasy of isolation. It is precisely in the midst of this desolate journey that the best-kept secret of the architects of destiny is revealed, a secret that the masses reject with visceral terror. It is the undeniable reason why the strong love extreme solitude. For the ordinary man, solitude is a sentence. It is the moment he runs out of cheap mirrors to seek validation. But in the desert of ash, when you have burned the bridges and find yourself surrounded only by the infinite horizon of your own will, extreme solitude ceases to be an absence to become a crushing physical presence. You feel the void. You feel the weight of the vacuum. And you discover that the vacuum is not empty, it is pregnant with infinite gravity. In this absolute solitude, your tactical isolation reaches perfection. There is no acoustic interference, there is no parasitic vibration. It is you and the anvil of reality. You breathe the cold air of the desert and realize that the atmospheric pressure that once threatened to crush you now sustains you. You love this solitude because it is the forge in its purest state. Without the noise of the biomass, you can pour the cast iron of your certainties with precision. In the desert of ash, you don't have to give explanations. You don't have to shrink your posture so the weak feel comfortable. You can expand your chest, strike the ground with the weight of your mandate, and hear how the frequency of your order travels through the silence without resistance. The obsidian baptism. Crossing the desert is not a penance. It is a high-pressure baptism. It is the material universe's load test to verify if the density you have reached is genuine or if it is just another arrogant pose. The black mirror of the cosmos will watch you walk through the ruins of your life. It will evaluate the tension of your muscles. It will audit the frequency of your thermal engine. If it detects that you cry for what is lost, if it perceives that you beg for water or ask for mercy from heaven, the test will be over. The mirror will return the mediocrity you tried to escape. But if you continue marching, if each step you take on the ash is firm, aseptic, and charged with the gravity of a predator, if you bathe in extreme solitude and absorb the weight of the vacuum without your pulse trembling, the black mirror will submit. It will understand fire cannot burn fire. It will see that the ash under your feet does not dirty you, but compacts under the weight of your certainty to form a new rock, solid and indestructible, that will become the main avenue of your new empire. Do not look for shortcuts out of the desert. Walk it with icy sovereignty. The molecular architecture of silence. The desert of ash is the specific phase where the phase transition occurs. In physics, when a substance changes from liquid to solid, it must release energy. This release is often violent. The destruction of your social circle and your old habits is the latent heat being expelled from your system. If you try to hold on to the old structures, you prevent the transition. You remain in a supercooled state, a liquid that should be solid but remains unstable and fragile. The monarch embraces the freezing. He understands that the cracks in his old life are the necessary ventilation for the forge's exhaust. In this vacuum, you begin to notice a new phenomenon: gravitational harvesting. Because you are the only dense object in a landscape of ash, the universe begins to deposit new materials at your feet. These are not the random debris of your past, but the high-grade components of your future. They appear as impossible synchronicities. A contact that should have been unreachable suddenly seeks you out. A resource that was non-existent manifests through a discarded channel. This is the universe filling the void you created. The vacuum is a low-pressure zone that must be filled by the surrounding field. By maintaining your charged immobility in the desert, you act as a gravitational sink. You don't go to the world, you make the world collapse into you. This is the difference between a hunter and a black hole. The hunter exhausts his thermal energy chasing prey. The black hole simply exists and consumes. The sovereignty of the unobserved. In the desert, you are unobserved by the biomass. This is your greatest tactical advantage. The Schrödinger's cat of your new empire is in a state of superposition. It is both built and unbuilt. As long as you don't seek validation from the old world, you maintain the coherence of your quantum state. The moment you show your plans to a gaseous person for approval, you collapse the wave prematurely. You allow their low-density observation to infect your high-density forge. The desert of ash protects you from this infection. It acts as a biological hazard suit for your burgeoning sovereignty. Enjoy the invisibility. Use this time to calibrate your internal obsidian lens to even higher degrees of focus. If you can stay focused on your internal blueprint while walking through external desolation, you have achieved the mastery of the void. You have proven that your reality is generated from within. The biomass believes that seeing is believing. The monarch knows that being is seeing. You become the center of gravity, and the ash begins to orbit you. Slowly, the dust begins to settle into patterns. The geometry of your throne starts to emerge from the grey wasteland, not by effort but by decree. Your empire is not a destination you reach. It is a crystallization that happens to you because you refuse to move. The desert was never a place of death, but the clean room where your divinity is manufactured. Stand still. Let the ash settle. The mirror is about to render your new world. The final hardening of the will. As you approach the far edge of the desert, the pressure will reach its absolute peak. This is the point of no return. Your old identity is a ghost, and your new one is a titan. The friction between these two states creates a final thermal flash, a moment of intense doubt or extreme external crisis. This is the universe's way of tempering your steel. If you flinch now, the blade will be brittle. If you hold your breath and maintain your frequency, the steel becomes unbreakable. You are no longer a man walking through a desert. You have become the desert itself, limitless, silent, and sovereign. And the transition is almost complete. The silence of the anechoic chamber has expanded to fill your entire horizon. There is no more noise. There is only the deep rhythmic hum of your will, vibrating at a frequency that the material world is now forced to mirror. The ash is becoming stone. You have survived the demolition. You have survived the nostalgia. You have survived the vacuum. You are now a concentrated point of pure mass in a universe that was once just cold fog. The horizon is no longer empty. It is a blank canvas awaiting the first strike of your hammer. The architecture of the throne is ready to be unveiled. The desert has done its work. It has stripped away the weak and left only the monarch. Walk out of the grey and into the light of your own creation. The mirror is no longer a tribunal. It is your reflection. Chapter 10. The Throne of Conscious Matter. The dissipation of smoke and the settling of the core. You have passed through the forge. You have watched the rotten wood of your old convictions burn and walked across the desert of ash without allowing nostalgia or biological terror to deflect the rectitude of your spine. You installed heavy phono-absorbent panels in your mind's acoustics and learned to wield the hammer of attention. When the smoke of demolition finally clears, the thermodynamic storm stops. The air around you becomes aseptic, still, and overwhelmingly dense. You are no longer a traveler trying to survive the elements. You are no longer the frightened explorer walking through a hostile landscape. The kinetic movement of constant struggle has ended. The desperate and vulgar friction that characterizes biomass has reached its conclusion. You stop at the exact center of the smoking ruins, lower your center of gravity toward the Earth's foundations, and settle. You have just taken possession of the throne of conscious matter. This throne is not a piece of gold furniture for vanity. Gold is soft, malleable, and decorative. The monarch's throne is a geometric state of being. It is a core of osmium and lead, a volume of immobility so massive and concentrated that its mere presence deforms the three-dimensional fabric of space and time. By sitting in this core, you abandon the condition of a victim forever. You cease being a victim of the observer paradox to become, irreversibly, the absolute and only master of the board. Orbital mechanics and the surrender of the environment. In classical physics, the law of universal gravitation dictates a rule that admits no appeals or mercy. The object of greater mass in a system forces all objects of lesser mass to orbit around it. The sun does not chase planets. The sun simply holds itself in its immense and burning density. It is that gravity that rules. The gravity of that mass forces dead rocks to trace perfect circles around it. Gaseous man lives his life breaking this law. Because he lacks his own mass, he spends his existence pursuing. He pursues money, pursues love, pursues opportunities and respect. Pursuit is an act of thermodynamic weakness. It is a confession of lack. It is the empirical confession that the object you pursue has more gravity than you. From the throne of conscious matter, the pursuit stops forever. By assimilating your new hyperdensity, the ecosystem around you experiences a gravitational shock. You no longer move toward the world. The material world rushes toward you. You will observe with mathematical coldness how the pieces of the environment begin to readjust their trajectories. Financial opportunities, strategic alliances, and logistical resources that previously seemed unreachable now fall attracted toward the gravitational pit of your certainty. The biomass around you senses this pressure. Weak minds, unable to sustain their own weight, will instinctively surrender to your immobility. Some will submit to seek refuge in the warmth of your core. Others, the parasites, will be flung into the outer vacuum, expelled by the centrifugal force of your tactical contempt. The universe is no longer a roulette of luck. It has become a perfect clockwork mechanism where you are the central gear, heavy and immovable, dictating the speed and rotation of all the other toothed wheels. The diamond chisel and the marble of time. Once seated in the gravity of your own sovereignty, the way you observe reality reaches its level of maximum lethality. The observer paradox, the physical fact that the gaze collapses the wave of probability, is no longer a concept you study, but the only tool with which you operate. Your gaze has ceased to be a weak flashlight. Your gaze has been forged under so much pressure that it is now a chisel of pure diamond, and linear time, that tyrannical concept that terrifies the masses, reveals itself as what it truly is, a static block of white marble. The future does not flow toward you. The future is an inert stone quarry awaiting your instructions. Every time you fix your eyes on a target, you are not making a prediction. You are leaning the diamond chisel against the stone and letting the mallet fall. Every look is deliberate. Every focus of your attention tears away a piece of leftover quantum fog and reveals the structure of victory that was already there. Victory was waiting for your mandate. There are no accidental glances. There is no wasted attention. If you look at prosperity, you carve it. If you look at health, you crystallize it. You have mastered the acoustics of silence to such an extent that your arm does not tremble when striking the chisel. The stridence of social doubts no longer penetrates the lead-lined walls of your inner vault. You are the sculptor blind to fear, deaf to failure, working in the darkness of your own certainty and forcing the material world to assume the exact shape of the empire you carry in your chest. The thermodynamics of the lead crown. Assuming this throne requires paying the highest tax existence demands, absolute thermodynamic responsibility. This is what we call the lead crown. The masses fantasize about having the power to create their own reality, but when they are handed the physics to do so, they break under its weight. Why? Because if you are the gravity that attracts wealth, you are also the gravity that attracted the ruin of your past. Sitting on the throne of conscious matter means the concept of injustice ceases to exist in your vocabulary. If the black obsidian mirror returns a reflection of betrayal, the monarch does not moan. He does not accuse the environment. He does not point his finger at the external biomass. He accepts the weight of the lead crown. He knows that if there was a crack in the wall of his empire, it was because he himself blinked. There was a millisecond in which his chisel slipped due to the moisture of an unconfessed fear. There was a low-frequency wave that escaped his chest and resonated in the room. The lead crown is the absolute certainty that you are the first cause. Nothing, absolutely nothing in your three-dimensional universe occurs without the express or tacit authorization of your level of density. This is absolute law. This responsibility would crush a gaseous man. It would drive him mad with guilt. But for you, it is the source of your invulnerability. If you are the sole architect of the disaster, then you are the sole architect of the solution. You do not have to ask for mercy. You only have to harden the core and rectify the geometry. The perpetual anechoic ecosystem, the integration of silence, the final state of conscious matter, is not an isolated meditation on a mountaintop. That is the escape route for hermits who cannot bear the friction of heavy matter. True mastery is exercised walking directly through the center of the market, through city traffic, and at the steel tables of boardrooms. But although your physical body moves among the crowd, your mind never leaves the throne. You have achieved the integration of the perpetual anechoic ecosystem. The biomass around you will scream. Society will enter cyclic panic. The sirens of economic crises and collective hysterias will howl, trying to tear your eardrums. But you walk encapsulated in your own studio silence. The heavy phono-absorbent panels you forged in the desert of ash are now the unbreakable walls of your portable consciousness. You can hear the words of men, but you no longer hear their terror. Their urgencies bounce off your armor and fall like dead birds. You respond to their crises with the slowness and precision of a moving glacier. You speak in sub-bass frequencies. Your heart rate is anchored to the foundations of geology, not to the volatility of the human climate. You are a closed system, thermodynamically perfect. You do not bleed heat toward the outside. You do not allow the cold of external fear to penetrate your vault. And this acoustic invulnerability generates a biological respect in all those around you. Nature reveres that which it cannot alter. The fusion of the paradox and the absolute mandate. At the summit of this state, the observer paradox resolves itself in an act of perfect asymmetry. A separation no longer exists between the quantum fog and the eye that observes it. You realize that you and the black obsidian mirror are made of the same dense matter. You are not facing reality trying to tame it. You are the central axis of that reality, dictating its form. You are gravity manifested in a skeleton of calcium and water. Every exhalation you emit is a physical decree. Every step you take is a seismic anchor. You have stopped learning physics. You have become the very law of physics operating on the ground. Probabilities have ceased to be options. They are your clay. Time has ceased to be your executioner. It is your quarry. And the material universe has ceased to be an indecipherable mystery. It is simply the theater of geometric operations where you, the monarch of conscious matter, reign. You exercise your crushing, glorious, and non-negotiable right to rule. Conclusion. The eye of the Leviathan. The limit of theory. You have reached the physical limit of theory. The pages of this book have fulfilled their thermodynamic function. They have destroyed the illusion of the blind watchmaker and dismantled the cowardice of the passive biomass. You have learned to line the asymmetric walls of your mind with the heavy insulation of non-reaction. You have installed lead traps to devour your own terrors. You have understood that hope is a sterile gas that evaporates with the wind and that certainty is a block of cast iron. You now possess the anatomical knowledge of the miracle, but theory, if not subjected to the brutal friction of practice, is just another useless echo. Theory is an echo bouncing in an empty room. From this exact millisecond, continuing to read is considered a thermal leak, an act of cowardice and evasion. To keep seeking answers on paper is to refuse to wield the hammer of your own attention. The material universe does not read books or pity scholars. The material universe responds purely and exclusively to barometric pressure, mass, and gravity. It is time for you to demonstrate to the cosmos how much density you have managed to accumulate in the anechoic silence of your isolation. The abyssal force. In the darkest and most crushing depths of the ocean, where sunlight dies and water pressure is capable of pulverizing naval steel, dwells the figure of the Leviathan. This creature does not survive in the abyss by chance. It survives because its own internal density equals and exceeds the destructive force of external pressure. The Leviathan does not move with the hysteria of the schools of fish that inhabit the surface, reacting to every shadow. Its swimming is slow, rhythmic, massive, and when the Leviathan opens its eyes in absolute blackness, its gaze does not seek to understand the ocean. Its gaze subdues the ocean. You must become that abyssal force. The eye of the Leviathan is the definitive metaphor for conscious matter. When you lift your eyes from this last paragraph, the three-dimensional world will attempt to assault you again. Society will emit its high-frequency shrieks. Everyday crises will try to seep through your concentration. They will demand that you become a gas again, that you react again, that you beg again before the immense black mirror of obsidian. Your response must be the absolute stillness of stone and the non-negotiable weight of the monster. The command of the void. Close this book. Anchor your feet in the foundations of the earth and feel the gravitational traction pulling on your skeleton. Straighten your spine. Completely silence the acoustics of your mind. If any parasitic vibration tries to bounce off your inner walls, immediately suffocate it with the contempt of tactical blindness. Allow the immense weight of the void to flood your chest until your breathing descends to the sub-bass frequency of absolute authority. And then, with the slowness of a millennial predator that has just awakened at the bottom of the abyss, open the eye of the Leviathan. Choose a point on the horizon of your life, your material empire, your impenetrable health, your absolute sovereignty, and fix your gaze upon the fog of quantum probability. Do not ask, do not hope, do not blink. Apply to that fog a thermodynamic pressure so monstrous, so cold, and so charged with weight Apply it until the atoms of physical reality have no choice but to surrender and crystallize under your command. The final strike. The farce of the independent landscape is over. The Iron Curtain has fallen. You are no longer the victim of the quantum paradox. You are the gravitational force that governs it. The anvil of existence is red hot, waiting for your order. Lift the hammer, take a deep breath, and deliver the first strike.